Assalamu alaikum. I'm Ayman Taleb, and this is the show about justice, a weekly talk show discussing the unjust obstacles and challenges facing American Muslims. We're coming to you live today, Tuesday, December 15, 2020. You can watch new
Just
episodes of the show about
facing
justice
American Muslims.
live every Tuesday at 5 p.m. Central Time on MLFA's Facebook page and YouTube channel. That's 6 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Mountain Standard, and 3 p.m. Pacific. Our guest tonight on the show is Zahra Billoo, Executive Director of CARE San Francisco Bay Area Chapter. Zahra's leadership and advocacy at CARE SFBA is recognized nationwide. She manages one of the largest care offices in the country and a team of civil rights and social justice advocates dedicated to the empowerment of American Muslims through legal services, legislative advocacy, and community organizing. Here at the Show About Justice, we believe that the U.S. Constitution applies to American Muslims too. We should not fear exercising our rights. We should not be suspected or treated differently because of our faith, ethnicity, or national origin. We don't want special treatment. We want equal treatment. Nothing more, nothing less. Please like and share this program. Engage with us by commenting and sharing this program. And don't forget to click on that follow or subscribe button for the latest from MLFA. Um, if you need MLFA's help, reach out to us. If you like what we do, support MLFA. So in tonight's episode, I'll be discussing with Zahra Billoo the historic turnout of American Muslim voters, the awakening of American Muslim voters' political consciousness, and the need for political engagement beyond Election Day. She joins us tonight from the Bay Area in California. Welcome, Zahra. It's good to have you on the show.
Walaikum salam. Welcome to me. I'm excited to be on. I can already feel myself being like, is it time for the end of the year yet? I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm really thrilled that you found the time to come on. I know you're spent a lot of time fighting the good fight and really appreciate that. Let's jump into it. So Zahra, what is the role of voting in establishing and upholding justice?
That's such a big question. I think of voting as one small step in a very important process. Is if I am voting, that is not enough. But if I'm not voting, then what am I doing and how dare I complain? And so we have a religious calling to advocate for justice. We have a constitutional calling to advocate for justice. And justice does not begin or end at the ballot box, but the ballot box is an important part of the process. And so Muslims need to vote, but also need to do so much more. We need to campaign and volunteer and phone bank and advocate and support our organizations, and then not rest after Election Day either, which is, I think, a lot of times where the energy starts to fall off is, well, we won, we got everything we wanted, and so we're done. And it's like, no, this is still ongoing work.
Mm-hmm. Right, exactly. 65% of Americans had cast their ballots in the 2020 election, or close to 65%. And this is the highest number of voter turnout since 2008 and the 1960 elections. Meanwhile, Muslim Americans broke all records when it came to the 2020 presidential election. Poll numbers were just one of them. Just as an example, 60% of eligible voters voted in the 2016 election, whereas in this election, 78% voted. My question to you, Zahra, is why do you think Muslim American voting participation in this election was this high? What factors do you think contributed to this?
Everything. It's just everything, right? It's the perfect storm. We've had 5 years, because count Trump's campaign year also with Ben Carson and Ted Cruz, and even what the Clintons were saying on the DNC stage. We've had 5 years of politicians building their political brand using Islamophobia. Mm-hmm. Donald Trump said ban Muslims. Ted Cruz said spy on Muslim neighborhoods. Ben Carson said no Muslims in his cabinet. And I always go back to the Clintons because it's important to remember that this was coming from both sides of the aisle, right? Bill Clinton famously said, if you're here to help us fight ISIS, you can stay. And I was like, okay, thank you so much, Bill Clinton, right? And the only Muslim on the DNC stage, which was Khizr Khan, frankly, like, who is a good person and an important leader, but his access to that stage is built upon the reality that his son died in a war that many of us believe was illegal and immoral. Mm-hmm. And so there was a message that was being sent, right? Is that you can only be Muslim if you're here to help us fight ISIS, which I'm not. That's not my job. I didn't create them and I'm not here to fight them. I'm here to protect the Constitution, or, no Muslims at all. And so anyway, so we've had 5 years of this, which, by the way, follows decades of anti-Muslim policy and patronization and imperialism and so on, since even before 9/11. And then you've got the healthcare crisis, particularly with COVID, right? Is that COVID has hit everyone, and our government's failure to solve for COVID, to protect us against it, to support those in need. You've got an economic crisis, in part because of COVID, but also because the rich are getting richer in this country, right? So the rich people didn't suffer in COVID. In fact, they got richer, but poor people are also getting poorer. We've got climate change. We've got a reputation that is tanking across the world. And Muslims are driven in part by issues that many of us consider as traditionally Muslim issues, like the Muslim ban or the wars abroad, but they're also driven by the reality that the climate is getting worse, by the concern that the economy continues to deepen the class divide, and that so many people have had COVID. The list goes on, right? There's also like student loan debt. And so it was almost a perfect storm. Is you have an incumbent who is continuing to antagonize minority populations, failing to lead, and actively causing everyone harm. And then you have, on the other side, you have challengers who are saying, we care about Muslims, we want to listen to you. And they're not perfect. They're so far from perfect. But they're willing, all of them, I think, in the end, came around to committing to repealing the Muslim ban on day one. And that was really big, right? Like those opposites, those extremes, I think really compelled Muslims to action in a way that I'm so excited about and grateful for, but also one that I don't want us to fall asleep on as we now settle into this next chapter.
Right. I mean, just because, President-elect Biden said that he's going to repeal the Muslim ban on day one doesn't mean that he's going to act on it right away. We have to organize it. This is an issue we really do care about. I mean, right. Every single issue that a politician talks about or acts on, there is an engine behind it. And right. For our issues, we need to be that engine. So, last night, the Electoral College formalized President-elect Joe Biden's victory in this election. 71% of in the general elections, 71% of American Muslim voters voted for Biden, and 29% voted for President Trump. Should those who voted for Biden expect the president-elect and his administration to automatically come through on his promises, or look out for our community's interests? I mean, we hinted at that a second, but I really want your take on it and for you to expand.
Totally get what you want me to answer. And I want to just say for a second, I don't know who the 29% of people who voted for Trump are. I don't know which Muslims there are. And I'm like, gosh, if the masajids were open and we weren't in COVID times, I would wonder who I was praying next to that would think it would be okay to elect someone who is a racist, sexist, misogynist, ableist, anti-Muslim, incompetent leader. Like, it's not even as though he's all of these bigoted things and then a good leader. Like, he is nothing. It's a joke, and we've become a joke across the world. And I just, if you are among the 29% of Muslims who voted for Trump, I want to understand what drove that, because I really don't. And so the 71%, right? And something doesn't line up with these numbers, Ayman, and I have to double check them, right? Because 71 and 29 is 100, but we know a lot of people voted for independence, the Green Party, and so on. And so I want to understand. I'm curious to know where those people are as well. I'm not saying your data is wrong. I just don't know. But as someone who has often voted independent, I'm like, wait, where am I in this math?
Oh, I
And so with
see.
the 71% of American Muslim voters who supported Biden, I think there is a sigh of relief, and that is nuanced among them, right? Some are very happy. They really liked Biden and they're happy he won. And others, understood that this was still better than Trump. And so they're relieved. Will they get everything they want from Biden automatically on day one? No, that's not how the world works. That's not how politics works, right? We've talked about in the past, and I think many people know stories of Barack Obama telling people, "Make me do it." And he said this to Muslims. He said this to immigrants' rights advocates. He said it to the LGBT community. He said, "Make me do it." Right? We know that people and money move politicians. And so sometimes we have the money, sometimes we have the people, but even where politicians align with what we are thinking, they want us to give them the political cover. And I wish they didn't need that. I wish they weren't braver, but they're oftentimes not. It's also the case, of course, that they're dealing with many, many competing priorities. And so for the priority you care about to rise to the top, you have to make waves, you have to shake things up, and you really have to push an agenda. And this isn't just about Barack Obama, by the way. Some people may remember, older members of your audience may remember that in the year 2000, George W. Bush met with American Muslims, made all sorts of campaign promises, and then didn't stick to them the way we would have wished he had. And one explanation for that is, well, the 9/11 terror attacks. Yes, but he still made the campaign promises, and he still could have kept America so-called safe without sort of trampling all over our civil liberties. But we lost political power in that moment. And so for us to be able to ensure that the Biden administration fulfills their promises, we are going to need to continue the engagement with the campaign. We're not always going to like it. We're not always going to get what we want. But there are people working on that transition right now, and Muslims need to be a part of that conversation. And then Muslims need to continue to push the administration once they take office. Some of that will happen through inside politics and inside engagement. Some of it will happen through outside politics and outside engagement, and both strategies are necessary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if I could follow up with a follow-up question, what steps can we take to be civically and politically engaged? I mean, these all sound like nice ideas, but what are there any concrete steps that we can take, maybe other communities have done, that we can follow in their footsteps as to and learn from what works and what doesn't?
Absolutely. So on an organizational level, it's an important time for organizations to publish and lobby for their priorities for the new administration. So we've seen some organizations do this, and more are doing it in the weeks to come. Make sure that the people that are working on the Biden administration transition team know what CARE cares about, what MLFA cares about, what AMP cares about, right? We can't just expect them to read our minds. And so we have to be out and center. Don't assume that they'll read our minds. Don't assume that they will find our websites. Make sure at an organizational level that we are publishing the materials, that we're lobbying to get them placed in the right hands, so that as early policy is formed, they know who is paying attention. At an individual level, for a lot of us, we have new elected officials right now, new members of our city councils, new mayors, new members of Congress, in some places, new senators. Get out there and get to know them. A lot of them are doing community engagement events right now. A lot of them are recruiting volunteers and interns. Go out and talk to them. One of the things that I always think about is, if I want someone to listen to me, I have to know them. And by the way, I have to tell them what I'm thinking and what's on my mind. And then I have to move them to action. And all of that doesn't happen overnight. And frankly, let's do it before we're in a crisis. Let's do it before we're facing challenges, because when we're in the middle of dealing with an implosion of some sort, right? Internal, external, whether we controlled it or not, that's not the time to build new relationships. That's the time to put those relationships to work. Right. And so in this period of relative calm between elections and many people taking office, some people have already taken office, but some people won't take office until early next year. Reach out to whoever won local races in your city, invite them to coffee, go to their events. Honestly, just sign up for their emails, because they'll send out the events. You just have to show up.
Right. No, I mean, what you said about, during the calm, this is the time to cultivate those relationships, because during the moments of crisis, that's the time to cash in on your
Right.
investment of that time that you spend working on that relationship. During the crisis is when you harvest, right? It's like the work that MLFA and the work that CARE is doing. Where, when things are, relatively calm, then this is the time that we actually need to be prepared, or preparing ourselves, so that when it's this is the time. Let's say, the expression that we use is, this is the time that we're paving the road, because you can't drive on a road that's not already paved yet. when it's
Right.
when it's time to actually drive on the road, when you're in that crisis, and you have to have that road between you and the hospital because there's a crisis right now. you can't you can't pave that road on your
Right
way to
then.
the hospital.
Right.
It doesn't work, you know. Um, so that's a very interesting point that you made. If you're just joining us, I'm speaking with Zahra Billoo, Executive Director of CARE, San Francisco Bay Area. We're discussing the historic turnout of American Muslim voters, the awakening of American Muslim voters' political consciousness, and the need for political engagement beyond Election Day. Please like and share this program. Engage with us by commenting and sharing this program. And don't forget to click on that follow or subscribe button for the latest from MLFA. If you need MLFA's help, reach out to us. And if you like what we do, support MLFA. So, Zahra, two of the most noticeable representatives in Congress are the first two Muslim congresswomen in American history, Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar. They, along with Andre Carson, are the three Muslims currently serving in the U.S. House of Representatives. Do you expect American Muslims will continue to run for office and break glass ceilings? And I want to put this also in the context that they are representing their districts,
Hmm.
right? They're not representing um, counties or states, let alone the national level. They are representing their district at the, in the U.S. House of Representatives. So, do you expect that American Muslims will continue to run for office and earn the vote of the people in their district, and uh, and and represent the interests of the people in their district?
Yes, absolutely. And this is such an exciting thing that we've seen really over the last several years. There's a great report out in its second now version that was co-authored by the staff at Care National, Empower Change, and Jetpack that tracks how many people ran for office that identified as Muslim and how many of them won. And even in just the 2 years between the reports, there has been incredible growth in Muslims running for office at all levels. Some win, some don't, and that's okay. It's all part of the process. For me, what this indicates is that Muslims are getting comfortable with their civic responsibility and learning how to exercise it. It also, win or lose, is a great way to really connect Muslims with their neighbors, with policymakers, really everywhere across the country. And I think that as more people run and more people win, even more people will feel comfortable running and winning. When I was growing up, I don't think I knew of any Muslim elected officials in the United States. And then I remember, for example, when Congressman Keith Ellison was first elected, and then Andre Carson, and now we've got Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar, and lots of members of state legislatures across the state. We've got people running for governor and lieutenant governor, school board and city council, and more young people can look to these people and say, wow, if they can do it, so can I, right? And that is key, because if I don't ever see myself in the role, then I'm not likely to run. And this is true for all sorts of leadership roles. And so I'm excited. I think that it is a silver lining of really the last 4 to 6 years of Islamophobic attacks targeting our community, where we finally said, enough is enough. Like, it's great to have allies who are running for office. It's great to have allies in office, but where are we? Why don't we speak up for ourselves? Why don't we advocate for ourselves? And I think we're finally starting to see the investment, the return on investment of that work. As it's happened, at an organizational level with youth training programs, at a masjid level with even just like civic engagement being brought into religious learning, and even at a family level, right? Is for people to successfully run for office, they need their family support. And I think we're starting to see some of those bold conversations starting to happen and work.
Right, 100%, 100%. And so piggyback off of the breaking the glass ceiling and representation.
We don't eat pigs, but that's okay.
That's
Sorry, that's my reaction every time someone says piggyback. I'm like, we don't do that.
Well, can we piggyback though? I know we're not eating pigs, but can we
eat pigs? Like why? Just leave them out of it. We're going to build on what you said, but that's okay.
Fine. All right. So let's building on what you said. The Pew Research Center estimates Muslim Americans account for roughly 3.45 million people. So that's about 1.1% of the U.S. population. And Muslim American groups mobilized and encouraged their community members to vote. And they did it remotely, right? Which illustrates our community's political power, as well as demonstrate that we can make a difference. And I'd like to hear your thoughts on this.
That's exactly true, is that if we spend the money and make the effort, then the results will manifest. And what we saw from American Muslim organizations and leaders in this last election cycle was a very real understanding that we needed to step up to the plate and take control of our destiny. Now, American Muslims make up about 1.1% of the population, but there are strong Muslim concentrations in very key parts of the country, right? Florida, Michigan, Texas. And so thinking about how we deploy resources so that we can be most effective and then scale the work is critical to making the most of what we have. Now, can 1.1% of the population do it all themselves? No. And we saw that this was true also, is that Muslim leaders and organizations and ordinary people understood that they needed to partner with other minority groups, with other social justice groups, so that we could build collective power. And I think this is true about any type of organizing right now, is that alone our groups are too small. But if we're partnering across various demographic and religious lines, economic lines, and otherwise, then we can really impact change, right? I think that we might be overstepping to say that it was American Muslims who took back the presidency in the last election. Arguably, it was Black women organizers who led the charge. But the reality that we were aligned and continue to align is how we build power.
Yes, I agree with everything you just said, and you spelled out, kind of how it happened and how it manifested itself. If you're just joining the program, I'm speaking with Zahra Billoo, Executive Director of CARE, San Francisco Bay Area. We're discussing the historic turnout of American Muslim voters, the awakening of American Muslim voters as political consciousness, and the need for political engagement beyond Election Day. Please like and share this program. Engage with us by commenting and sharing this program. And don't forget to click on that follow or subscribe button for the latest from MLFA. If you need MLFA's help, reach out to us. If you like what we do, support MLFA. Zahra, so with this election, 2020, that's definitely going to go down in the history books. Why do you think, why was there an increase in voter turnout in this election?
I think it was two things. One of the things is what we talked about sort of at the beginning of our conversation, which is just there was a lot at stake. We are in a historic health crisis that has severely crippled the economic realities of so many individuals and families. We are continuing with our wars abroad. We are facing increasing bigotry and xenophobia. And a lot of people have said enough is enough. And they understand that though elections and voting in elections is just one part of our bigger fight for social justice, it is still one part. It is very, very critical. And so I think that that was one of the major issues. The other factor I think that's also important is that people and communities have been investing in building, organizing, in building a pipeline of leadership, in teaching about civic engagement. And so if you consider the work that MLFA and CARE and AMP and MASS and ICNA and so many Shura councils across the country have done year after year after year, there's a buildup, right? And the reason we ask people to invest in organizations during times of calm is for longer term growth, is that my donation to MLFA today may or may not help someone today, but for sure helps MLFA build so that when I really need them, right? When a really big election or trial is coming up, they are ready. And I think that's what was critical. Even, using CARE San Francisco Bay Area as an example, as we were planning for the 2016 election, our staff here was about 6 people. As we went into the 2020 election, our staff here was 20 people because the community invested and we were able to manifest those investments in more strategic outputs in this election. And so really, terrible circumstances moved people to action, but also community investment enabled all of us to take better action this time around.
Right. Yeah, and we also saw, a lot of get up and vote efforts. We saw a lot of grassroots level. I mean, even with everything, even with COVID, shutting down
Right.
the country, people were going from, the traditional campaigning, going from door to door. You had people working their phones if, they're working remotely or they're working their networks on social media, or they are, working their emails. I mean, they, the I mean, I was telling people if this COVID thing happened 10 or 20 years ago and the internet was not where it is today, I think we would have had truly a disaster on our hands. But we were able to utilize the technology that we have, literally at our fingertips, and utilize that to something productive, and bringing the country uh, aware of the issues that they care about, so that they can research the candidates that would best represent their interests and cast their vote for that candidate. And we're talking about our community, right? Regardless of the faith affiliation of that candidate, the many of the Muslims in their areas, they banded together and they said, you know what, this candidate for our district or this candidate in this office or that office is more likely to represent our issues. They have taken the time to talk to us. They have taken the time to speak about our issues from the stump. They have they were able to they have shown that they cared. So now let's put them in office. Let's hire them, right? And let's stay engaged with them. And if they don't come through on what we asked of them, then next election we fire them and we get somebody else.
And that's, it's funny, we've got a lot of business owners in the Muslim community, and that's how you think of new hires, right? Is I'm going to vet you, I'm going to recruit you, then I'm going to vet you, then I'm going to vet you some more, and then I'm going to call your references, and then I'm going to hire you. But I'm still your employer after I hire you. And so I need to remember that, right? And work with you and be in touch with you and coach you and manage you. And we may not always align on communication styles. And maybe you won't do everything I need you to do, but you'll do some other things, or we'll disagree. And then I have an opportunity, right, to hold you accountable, to say, did you fulfill what I laid out as job objectives for you? I, the voter, I as a member of the community. And so I think that there was a lot of that. And, the thing about this is that it's also, there's a domino effect. So if I'm voting and I'm talking about voting, then my family is voting and talking about voting, and then their family is talking about voting and voting, right? And so that spread is so key. You know, the one other thing that we haven't talked about is that the Trump administration really sought to deprive people of their votes, right? To discourage them from voting safely. And so I wonder how much of the increased voter turnout was also just a rebellious reaction to that. Like, no, you will not take this away from us. This is ours. And we will show you that it is ours.
You make a very excellent point, that about, talking about the disenfranchisement of many different people, even groups of people, and then those who felt like, you know what, no, you can't take that away from me.
Right.
I am, it's like, you know what, I was lazy about it before, but
Right.
now I'm making it a priority,
Right.
right? Um, and yeah, I like the analogy you made as far as, making it like a business, for, addressing those of us in our community
Mhm.
who are, business people. That's a very good analogy.
Or even
Um,
how we're employees, right? Like,
mhm,
so if I'm an employee and I report to a boss, well, then why my elected officials are employees and they report to the boss. And guess what? This time I'm the boss. We're
mhm.
all the boss.
Right, and that goes to show you, that demonstrates the power that is within punching that ballot, right? That and just recently I was at a museum in Austin, Texas, actually, where they had an entire exhibit about the civil rights movement and how
Mhm.
a big portion of the civil rights movement in the 50s and 60s, and that continued onward, but really, really, really hit the fan in those decades, where you had um, individuals and groups that stood and protested and defied and made it, forget the systemic oppression that was in place to repel black people from voting. You had people, individuals and groups, and they organized just to sit there and intimidate black citizens from voting, just so that to because and that shows you just the power of the vote, that if they do really get over that fear
Mhm.
and do cast their vote and have their voice heard, right,
Right.
then real change is going to happen, and these people are afraid of
Right.
change from happening. And so those who feel that they are, um, if I can use the word voiceless, give me another word to work with here. Um,
Um,
those whose voices have been taken away,
those
or
who've been censored or
those who
targeted.
have been censored or silenced,
Yes.
right? Those who have been silenced, those who have been censored, they the they have been made to feel censored. But
Right.
when it comes to the election, right? When you register, you can register to vote, and you
Mhm.
can, and you know how you just got to get over your own fear, and register to vote, and you go out to the ballot, you go out to your voting location, and in that booth no one can tell you what to do.
Right.
And and um and when you're talking about a group, many groups of people who were disenfranchised, especially this last election, those of us who can vote or were not intimidated from not voting, that it's a responsibility, that not only for my own civic duty, but but
Yeah.
as a
No,
collective,
that's right. Right. Is that people fought and died for us to be able to vote,
literally.
and
Yes.
the right wing and powers that be would not work so hard to deprive us of that right if it were ineffective, right? Like, why fight my voting if it has no impact?
Yes.
It is because it has impact that they fight it, that they try to restrict it, that they try to scare me out of doing it. And that's all the more reason for me to show up. I also, from a place of faith, think about the right to vote as a privilege, not one that I earned, but one that I am entrusted with. And as such, Allah will ask me, what did you do? Right? Like, I gave you this ability, this access, this power. It is not in and of itself a complete step. It doesn't automatically establish justice simply because I have done it, but it is one privileged way in which I can participate in it. And I will have to answer for what I did with that responsibility.
100%. 100%. And this is actually an idea that we have echoed on this program as well as other programs that MLFA has done. And I know CARE chapters around the country, including the one that you're running in San Francisco Bay Area, has done a marvelous job in making sure that that Muslims are rocking the vote. I remember growing up, that it was the slogan was, "I am Muslim, I'm American, I vote."
Yes.
I remember that. And
Yeah.
I was a child. I was too young to vote, but I
Right.
remember that. And I grew up with that. I'm born and raised in this country, and that's kind of something kind of pretty much took for granted that,
Right.
okay, I'm a citizen. I was born and raised here. I'm an automatic citizen. I get to have a say
Right.
in the outcome of how things are run in my world. And
Absolutely.
many people take that for granted, that they don't. We said that a historic turnout is 65% of Americans, but what about the other 35?
I know.
Did they give up,
No.
or did they feel that their voice, it doesn't count, or did they feel that it doesn't matter, or they feel that both options are bad and so they don't want to or they don't want to get their hands dirty with the process? I mean, there's a lot of different reasons,
Right.
um, but at the end, but um, again, this is
No,
from
you're absolutely
from
right. I mean, I think keep in mind also that voting is not accessible for everyone. So one of the other things we haven't talked
right,
about that I think is a really important development in the context of COVID is, a lot of states went to vote by mail, automatic vote by mail, right? Early voting really increased. And so when I look at the 35% of Americans that don't vote, sometimes I wonder, well, is it because you couldn't take any time off of work on Tuesday, election
right,
day? Because you had to take your kids in, or because the ballot wasn't translated into a language that you understand, right? There's so many further barriers to voting. But I agree with you. I think some people are disenfranchised. They really feel they're disenfranchised and apathetic because they feel like the system isn't working for them. And I
mm,
empathize with that because the system wasn't meant to work for people that look like you and me. It was meant to work for rich white men who owned other people and thought that that was legitimate and were willing to make other people poor and were supportive of the genocide of indigenous people, and like the list goes on and on, right? The system isn't broken, it works. Sorry, the system isn't broken, it works exactly how it was meant to work, and some people are done with it and they're tired of it. But I think that that's also why celebrating incremental wins is key. As Muslims, we are taught not to despair and to be hopeful. And so I would like to believe that people who didn't vote in this election because they are despairing may still be able to come back, knowing that this is not, again, a perfect system. It's so far from it, and that this is just one of many steps that we need to take to advocate for justice,
mhm.
but that we need everyone participating for us to have real substantial impact.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like the point that you made about people that they really have to go out of their way to be able to cast their vote because they can't take work off on that day. They have, familial obligations, and their time is extremely crunched on every day, including election day, and they cannot. I remember something happened, like, this is just a personal anecdote. When I was in college in the 2004 election, I was working, and at when I got to classes, everybody was talking, everybody was talking about the election. I'm like, wait a minute, I didn't vote yet,
Right.
and I needed to go like
Mhm.
40-minute drive because I didn't
Right.
do it early voting, and
Right.
because I'm away at college, I was still within driving distance. But I walked into work and I said, "Boss, I didn't vote yet," and he said, "Okay, I guess we'll have to find somebody to fill in for you today,
That's so
but
nice of him.
go cast your vote."
Right.
right? So I went and I caught it just before they, before they closed the polls. But that was nice of my boss at the time to do that. I know most people don't have that luxury, you know, um, and it really is. You gotta, like, if you got privilege, practice it in the right direction.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. Both true for the boss and for the voter, right? Is that we don't decide which privileges we have, but we are entrusted with them, and we need to make sure that we're making the most out of them. But even this, like, it's hard, right? Initially, as voting rights were expanded to Black Americans and others, there were other barriers put into place, including, for example, property ownership or ID laws. And so, as we think about the very many fights that American Muslims should be concerned about as it relates to civil rights, voting rights is one of them. And we need to make sure that we continue to make voting more and more accessible for our fellow Americans.
Yeah. So, let's carry it back. I really like this conversation. We kind of were winging it here, but I really liked it, and we really dove into areas that were worth discussing. So, my next question to you, Zahara, is that, or let me preface the question. Representation.
Yeah.
Uh, representation will make the American Muslim community, as citizens of this country, realize that they will be able to fulfill their responsibility, have an impact, and add their voice to American democracy. So, my question to you is, can our community afford not to be involved in the political process or have representation?
I mean,
Can
it's an easy question. Like,
right.
it's funny, right? Like, you know what I'm going to say. The thing I actually want to say based on your question is I'm not interested in representation for the sake of representation.
Hmm.
In Black communities, I have learned that there is a saying uh, to the effect of not all skin folk are kinfolk. And so, more Muslims in office is not in and of itself a win. And we need to be clear about this, right? Is Muslims who support CVE, Muslims who support Zionism, right? Like, there are many, many layers to the types of Muslims I'm not interested in seeing run for office. And if you ask me to choose between a Muslim Zionist and someone who is not Muslim and advocates for justice for Palestinians, I'm going to choose the person who is not Muslim. And so when I think of which kinds of Muslims running for office are of interest to me and that I think merit the community support, it's very position dependent, right? Are you grounded in the community? Are your values derived from a place of justice that we agree on? And, are the positions and policies you're advocating for going to help Muslims and all people? And if you meet those criteria, then we will take a look at your campaign. And we will talk about whether or not the Muslim community should support you. Now, clarifying, of course, I mean that in our personal capacities, because both CARE and MLFA are nonprofit 501c3 organizations, right? But even as we talk to young people who are thinking about futures in office, Muslim for the sake of Muslim isn't going to do it for me, and I don't think is advancing us. And so it's an important distinction for me to make as I think about who's running for office. Now, can we afford to not be involved in the political process or not have representation? It's the question feels like a no-brainer to me. No, we cannot afford that. We absolutely need to demand that our voices be raised, that we have a seat at the table, and that we be setting the agenda, not just for ourselves, but for our country's future. We're a growing part of the American population. We're an incredibly diverse group with many, many life experiences to offer. And for us to begin to solve so many of the injustices that plague our country, we need to be a part of the solution.
Very well said. Um, so I'm going to go off the cuff and ask you a different question altogether. Let's talk about CARE for a second. Council on American Islamic Relation. This is the organization that you work for. You're the executive director of your chapter in San Francisco Bay Area. For those who have never heard of CARE, and you know what, there's a first time for everything. What what does CARE do, and specifically your chapter? What's the work that you are doing, and if you could tie it in to our conversation about the you know the about a conversation about the historic turnout for our
Yeah.
community in the polls.
Absolutely. I really thought you were going to ask me about my cats with that like preface to the question. I was like, yes, we'll get to talk about something fun, but sure, I'll talk about care.
If you want, I wasn't gonna go into fun stuff. If you want, I can go ask you about your cats later. But
I mean,
uh,
I'm gonna tell you about my cats and bring them into any conversation, no matter what, like no matter whether you ask or not. But for
okay,
those who don't know, I'm a proud cat mom, and my cats are named Justice and Peace because you need justice to accomplish peace.
there you go.
CARE, for those who don't know, is the nation's largest American Muslim civil rights organization. We have been around for 26 years. Our mission is to promote justice, empower American Muslims, and enhance the understanding of Islam. I'm really grateful and humbled to be the executive director of the San Francisco Bay Area office, where I've now been for over a decade. We're the third largest team in the country and the only one of its size that is led by a woman and actually a full management team of women and women of color. And so it is really exciting to be doing this work in, honestly, also the most progressive part of the country. The San Francisco Bay Area is really pushing forward in terms of privacy regulations and not falling for security theater in terms of demographic representation in elected office and in community organizing, among many other things. And so 2020 was a challenging year for us because we do so much in-person outreach at CARE. We're spending 20% of our time out in the community talking to people about the free legal services we offer. So if anyone's been visited by the FBI facing employment discrimination, school bullying, and now even immigration services, we're out in the community saying we provide these services for free. We're out mobilizing voters, urging people to turn out for the census. And so that was our plan for 2020. And then in March, everything went remote, everything went virtual. California has been very hard hit by COVID. And so we've moved all of our programming online. But we've talked a lot about the election. The other really big civic engagement opportunity this year was the census. And so our team spent now countless hours making thousands of phone calls, sending thousands of text messages, hosting webinars, sending out mail to people's homes to urge them to participate in the census, because representation in the census impacts not just congressional districting, by the way. So when we think about legislation and who we want voting on things that matter to us, that's driven in part by the census. It also impacts, of course, federal resource dollars, which, of course, we're seeing we need so much now in this crisis that all of us are in. And then in the lead up to the election, we hosted candidate forums to do something that, you said, Ayman, is bring the candidates to the community, answer questions, have them make their pitch to us, convince me why I should hire you. So we connected candidates to communities. We reminded people to vote. We asked people to remind other people to vote. And so we're really humbled and proud, sort of contradictory, but like honored to have had the opportunity in this year to be able to engage the community in so many ways. But our work must continue. I remember when we went from Bush to Obama, we were hopeful, but we knew that the work had to continue. And I think we're in that same turn of events right now, is that we've seen a lot of progressives elected to office, not just the change in power that's coming in the White House, but members of Congress, school boards, city councils. But we have to continue to engage them. We have to make them do their job.
Right. That's great. Okay, let's talk about your cats, Justice and Peace.
I mean, I did. I just told you I've got like 2 cats, Justice and Peace. They're like 8 months old, and
Okay.
if they were with me right now, they'd be crawling all over the laptop because they have no boundaries.
There you go. That's awesome, and that's awesome that you got justice and peace, because you can't have peace without justice. We're always, we always hear, peace, 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 but as
Exactly.
Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. wrote from Birmingham jail, that peace is not the absence of tension, but it is the presence of justice, and that is a very, very important concept for us to have. That if we bring this up, it's going to rock the boat. Well, you know what? If what we need to bring up, if it's standing for justice, if it is fulfilling someone's right, if we're
Absolutely.
if we're not not fulfilling someone's right, that this must come on the table, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to ask us about fulfilling justice. And justice is, by definition, right? When you're talking about, like, the linguistic meaning of what does adl mean, what does justice mean? It means to put something where it belongs,
Right.
right? And to have someone's right not fulfilled, you are not putting their right where it belongs, and this is an oppression. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to ask us about that. So before we close, Zahra, is there anything that you'd like to add?
I'm a fundraiser by profession. I'm a lawyer by training and a fundraiser by profession. And, I want to urge people that are tuning in to be grateful for what we've been blessed with this year. I've said over and over again that I have a job, that I know where my next meal is coming from, that I have shelter, makes me among the most privileged in the world today. The work that MLFA does to protect American Muslims and their access to justice is critical. Now, people may be asking, well, doesn't CARE do the same thing? And yes, absolutely. We need all of the organizations doing all of the work, because there are people languishing in prison right now that MLFA is advocating for. And I know that the election of Joe Biden presents hope and opportunity to seek pardons, to lessen prosecutions, and to even ease the conditions of the most oppressed in our community. And so I really hope that if people are tuning in and they haven't made a donation to MLFA yet this year, that they will. If they have, jazakallah khair to them. I hope they will increase it. I hope they will consider becoming monthly donors. Ayman, you and I, we've got these jobs full time doing this work, but these aren't the only ways that people can contribute. They can contribute financially, they can volunteer, they can engage, and they can tell more people. And so you didn't ask me to do that, but I just think that all of our organizations need more money, and I am confident that many people in our community have it.
Yeah. Thank you so much for saying that, Zahra. And uh, let me say it. Let me also say it for you. And I'm not saying it just because you said it. You know that I support the work of CARE, and so the two organizations very much complement each other's work, that are going in the same direction, for justice for Muslims in America. We have our different scopes of work. There is some overlap, but by and large, what the work that MLFA does, and the work that CARE does, and other civil rights organizations that cater to Muslims, all of these organizations are needed by our community, and we need all the support and the help that we can get, inshallah. To our viewers and listeners, the Muslim Legal Fund of America highly encourages the American Muslim community to be involved in the political process, as we believe having our issues represented in the best way, or is the best way, to make positive change for the condition of our community. At the moment, the best way we can make a positive impact for our community is to litigate the cases that matter to our community. Some of these cases are being handled by the Constitutional Law Center for Muslims in America, which is funded by a grant funded by the Muslim Legal Fund of America, and has about 100 open cases right now. We receive applications every day from people who are going through unjust challenges and obstacles. The time to act against oppression and persecution is now. Brothers and sisters, you can help and support victims of injustice. You can click on the link below and make a donation, or uh, you can go to the website, donate on our website by visiting mlfa.org/give, and you can volunteer, support through volunteering by visiting volunteer.mlfa.org. Sister Zahra, thank you so much for taking the time and being our guest today. And, we really appreciate it, taking the time to speak to us. And please keep up the good fight. You're doing such a wonderful job in the chapter over there. And
It takes all of us. Keep us in your du'as, and inshallah we'll talk soon.
Inshallah, you too. And to our viewers, join us next time here on MLFA's Facebook page or YouTube channel next week, Tuesday, December 22nd, 5 p.m. Central. Thank you for tuning in. And don't forget to share this video and give your feedback. This is the show about justice. I'm Ayman Taleb. Have a good evening and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.